Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recovery podcast. My name is Dolly, and I'm a licensed mental health professional with experience in codependency healing and childhood trauma recovery. And in our podcast today, beautiful Michelle, my co host, is here with me, and we will be discussing trait number 4 from the laundry list, which is we either become alcoholics or marry them or both or find some other compulsive personality. So today I'm excited to be discussing the abandonment wound and how we stay stuck in the cycles and how do we recover from this abandonment wound. So hi Michelle, come
Hi,
on in.
Dolly. Hello. Glad to be back. And wow, is this a juicy trait? Oh my goodness, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Wellington, and I'm co-host of this amazing podcast we're creating. I am a lot of things. I like to call myself a emotional integration guide, helping people who have experience the effects of growing up in an alcoholic family or dysfunctional family, helping them integrate that so they can live vibrant and embodied lives. So happy to be here and jump into this trait. So again, as Dolly said, that the laundry list trait, which are characteristics that were developed, list of characteristics developed by the founder of ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, that really pinpoint what happens to people when they grow up in these kinds of families. So this trait, we either become alcoholics, marry them, partner with them, get into a relationship with them, or both, or find another compulsive personality, such as a workaholic, to fulfill our sick needs or our sick abandonment needs. Now, there's a lot going on in there. I always remember when I first heard this, I was like, sick abandonment needs, what does that mean? We're gonna be talking about that. And then also wanted to let you know that with these traits, there is another way that these like the effects can be expressed. So if you think about the laundry list as a way that like we internalize our victimization, the other laundry list is a way that we sort of externalize our victimization and become victimizers. So this other laundry list trait that kind of pairs and goes with trait 4 is we accept. Oh, sorry. Right. The flip side. Sorry. We need to pause for a second because I got confused. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
We
okay.
have to edit that. I forgot that I'm talking about the flip side. I needed to say the flip side and I went into the other. So we'll just mark at 12:44. We'll just need to go back and edit that. Sorry about that. Okay.
All right, so let us begin with do you want to start over or are you comfortable?
No, I
Okay,
just wanted to get into the flip
the
side. I
as
can
well.
just start over.
All right, so let's talk about the abandonment wound. How is it created, what effect it has, and how do we recover from it? So, abandonment wound in children who are from dysfunctional families, it is a deep psychological, emotional injury resulting from adverse effects in childhood where a child felt neglected, unsupported, unloved, felt fearful for their survival. And these wounds are formed when the fundamental need for safety, security, connection, stability is not met, either through physical unavailability or emotional availability, unavailability of the caregiver, or their distance, or they're cruel, or they're critical, or they're dismissive, or they're just a hostile person, or if they're an addict themselves. An addict parent cannot only be present for their own addiction, right? So, in this type of environment, and many times it's not even the parent's fault that this abandonment wound is formed because many times parents get separated from they literally abandon the child because they either pass away or they are away due to physical distance or there's a divorce or there's so repeatedly any event that leads to that child's neglect of emotional, mental, physical, spiritual needs of and safety needs and needs of connection, that abandonment causes a deep injury.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, this with this trait, there's a lot of pieces, and I'm glad that you started, Dolly, with this abandonment, because that's what causes us to find these compulsive personalities. And so you just so beautifully laid out how the abandonment wound sets in,
Hmm.
and that becomes familiar. And this is like sort of the hardest thing for me to wrap my brain around when I entered recovery, was that I find comforting painful abandonment experiences. Like my brain knows I don't want to feel hurt in a relationship. I don't want pain, but
Hmm.
it's familiar because it was what was ingrained in me at
Hmm.
a young age. That's how I experienced love. I experienced love, you know, as a certain level of pain. And so as an adult, I'm going to keep seeking out love in the way that's familiar to me. And so when it says, we fulfill our sick abandonment needs, and I don't personally think anybody is sick, but it's like I would maybe replace that with dysfunctional. We try to fulfill our maladaptive, dysfunctional need for recreating abandonment that is familiar to us, even though it's painful.
Hmm.
So what could this look like? A person might find themselves constantly in a relationship where they feel abandoned emotionally. Maybe like they're with somebody and like they're physically there, but emotionally not available.
Yeah,
That is a form of abandonment.
completely.
Or you're, you know, in a marriage and this person is abandoning you because they're focused on like work or something else that they do compulsively,
Yeah.
and you don't feel like you feel their presence. That is abandonment. What would you add to it?
Yeah, so what does abandonment look like in adult relationships is people not being vulnerable with each other, not being open to each other, not being receptive to each other, people rejecting each other, right, in relationships and judging each other. Anything that leads you to separate yourself from your partner and judge them or shun them or blame them or make them prove your love to me, that's a form of abandonment. The highs and lows that happen in relationships, that's a form of abandonment. And if there's addiction present, there is abandonment present always.
Mhm.
Anytime the partner makes you feel unworthy, unseen, unheard, reject, blame, all these are forms of abandonment that are very common in relationships. When you
Mhm.
feel helpless, lonely, when you have fear, insecurity, that's all result of not only the abandonment that you carry from your childhood, but current cycles that you are repeating. And
Mhm.
that's what happens. Children who are from dysfunctional families, they recreate these patterns of highs and lows, that they do this dance. That's why they call it sick abandonment need, because they do this dance of chasing somebody who will reject me, and then when they are unavailable, then going through the lows of, oh my goodness, I'm unworthy. This reminds me of how my parents rejected me and abandoned me. So people who were abandoned in their childhood, they have high need for external validation, but they choose people who are unavailable to do the work to fulfill those needs. And
Mhm.
that's why the this sick cycle of chasing people who will remind you of your unworthiness, who will keep that insecurity alive. It's a form
Mhm.
of emotional addiction.
Oh yeah.
It's a
Oh yeah.
form, yeah. It's a form of emotional addiction where you keep chasing people to have them prove their love to you.
Mhm. And this is, oh my gosh, this is so important when you're bringing up. And this phrase, so glad this phrase, emotional addiction. Because I'm not, I know people are familiar with like physical addiction, like I'm addicted to alcohol or drugs. Um, But this emotional one, I think, is so much more insidious
Mm-hmm.
because if we just look at what the television is showing us, movies, music, like it's normalized to just be doing these dysfunctional things in relationships, like chasing after unavailable people
Mm-hmm.
or running away from the available people, which we'll get into in the other laundry list trait. It's become so normalized. And
Mm-hmm.
what it really is it's a type of addiction, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You're addicted to seeking out relationships that mirror your childhood abandonment because it's familiar, because it's comfortable. It may be painful, but it's familiar.
Right. And above all, that inner child that's still hurting inside you is still trying to fix the broken home. It's still trying to gain the validation of that parent in
Mhm.
in in shape of your partner, but you're still trying to fix what happened when you were a child and trying to not get abandoned now and not get rejected and change the circumstance. But meanwhile, you're still picking the people who are have similar attributes to the unavailable parents of the past, who
Mhm.
remind you, who behave the same way,
Right.
right?
And then I'll also add that, this part of the trait, which is like we marry, we partner, we get in relationships with
Mm-hmm.
alcoholics. And that it doesn't have to be a person who is an alcoholic. It could be a person who, is a workaholic
Yeah.
and emotionally unavailable. It could be a person who has another compulsive behavior like gambling, extreme sports, uh,
Yeah.
or a fixation with like success. It
Mm-hmm.
could be, a person who is chronically unreliable and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally distant. So, we read this trait and it's like, well, I'm not partnered with somebody who's an alcoholic,
Yeah.
but do they have some other behavior that recreates that abandonment experience?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, like at the heart of addiction, abandonment lives, especially with the
Yeah.
people who are close to the addicts or the alcoholics or whatever it is.
Yeah, unavailability. So addiction is just a way to be unavailable. You can be
Mhm,
addicted to any number of things: love, sex, shopping, work, other people, substances, drugs, alcohol. But all these are ways you become unavailable or put distance between true intimacy and yourself because love and intimacy was so painful.
mhm,
So now you chase the same pain, but then you run away from it because you don't
mhm,
have the tools to fix it, to soothe it, to figure a way out. So we
mhm,
keep chasing the same cycles without figuring out how to get out of them, how to find that other way. That's
mhm,
where the ACA work comes in, right? You
mhm,
do the work to figure out that there is another way, and we'll talk about that later. But recognizing that I have pain of abandonment and then understanding what does this pain of abandonment feels like. Is it loneliness, isolation? Is it withdrawing from my own self? Understanding your abandonment wound, and then how does it show up in relationships? How does my abandonment wound, my insecurities, my limiting beliefs are affecting my relationship? And
mhm,
what do I do to escape the relationship?
mhm,
Right? You may not be addicted to alcohol, you may be addicted to something else. You may be addicted to chasing the alcoholic,
mhm. Yeah.
making it work. Some people are addicted to relationships. Making the relationship work is their only goal, no matter what.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and this is actually having me reflect on, how this trait has expressed itself in my own life. And I'll never forget the moment when I was doing, inventory, working the steps in
Mhm.
ACA. And one of the inventories is a relationship inventory where you write down every relationship you had and where your traits showed up.
Mhm.
And it was such a huge aha for me to realize that, like, every person I'd been in a long-term relationship with had some kind of compulsive behavior. I'll just leave it at that. And that pattern was very much clear. in my relationship history.
Mhm.
Um, and just like how freeing that is too. So
Mhm.
I just want to also just say like
Mhm.
if if you're listening and you're like, oh well, I already know I have this pattern, like you're not alone.
Yeah. Oh
It's a
my
very,
goodness,
very
no.
common thing, and like I'm one of them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and like it starts with awareness, right? It starts
Yeah.
with just like looking at your history
Mhm.
and just being like, oh, this is what I've been doing. And this is
Mhm.
why, you know?
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
start to get a giant why, like
Mhm.
why these patterns are so ingrained, why they keep happening. So I found it really freeing.
Yeah. Understanding how you were hurt in the past and how you're repeating the dysfunction in order to heal, that is the key. Like
Hmm.
Michelle said, know why do I chase after unavailable people? Why do I try harder to prove myself to others who are not accepting of me? Why do I abandon myself? That's the biggest crime of them all. Why do
Hmm.
I abandon myself? Because I cannot tolerate the present moment or the relationship, right? So
Hmm.
start to see through your patterns that are not working for you in order to understand why do you do this. Once you understand why you behave a certain way, is only then you can show up with compassion and understanding. Only then you can make progress. Once you peel the onion back, but you're accepting of it. That this is my onion.
Hmm. Well, I want to also add a piece about my onion, which is that, this first part of the trait, we either become alcoholics, and again, substitute that for any kind of compulsive behavior. I don't think
Yeah.
we spoke to that. Like, people who grow up in dysfunctional families, alcoholic families, that they become it, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not just that like you're chasing it
Yeah.
because you had a caregiver who showed up that way. You might actually become it. And like that's a bit of my story too, where, I had a really unhealthy relationship with drinking for a long time. And now 8 years sober, you know, what I'm able to see about why I chose to have a relationship with alcohol in that way. It's because I literally used it to block trauma.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a new
Exactly.
a new thing for me, coming out of 12-step recovery where there's a lot of labels on things, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot there's a lot of labels and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily like identify as like an alcoholic in the sense that I learned in the rooms, but like I definitely used alcohol, TV, food,
Mm-hmm.
shopping, relationships, to block the trauma
Mm-hmm.
that I felt. And so that is why we can become the alcoholic. We can become a person who has compulsive behaviors because it is a way to soothe. It is a way to block.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
good news is like there is a way out of that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are struggling with certain compulsive behaviors, whether it's, as serious as like a substance abuse issue, or it's like chronically scrolling social media, or you have some other sort of under the radar compulsive
Mm-hmm.
behavior. Maybe you like overeat a lot at night,
Mm-hmm.
in this, within the constructs of your home.
Yeah.
But that is why, it's you develop these maladaptive strategies to block the trauma, to block the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And in
Mm-hmm.
program and through this work, you get to fully grieve finally. You get to grieve the losses, and you get to learn that you don't have to pick up this behavior to numb or block.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually fully feel it,
Mm-hmm.
release it, and heal
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's what alcohol or any substance, any drug does, any addiction. It wraps you in itself so much that you forget who you are, what your inner family needs, what your life is about. It just all becomes about numbing the pain, chasing away the pain and then looking for the next fix. And then it becomes a habit. Addictions become habits so quickly because not only they help us feel better, they help us get away from our problems and forget about our problems, right? So have compassion for the addiction that helped you get through the difficult time, but also have awareness to understand that this addiction is keeping me from living my life. It's stopping me from feeling my feelings. It's stopping me from trusting myself and developing my own intuition. Addiction blocks so many things. It stops your true expression of yourself. It takes away, robs you of your truth and so many years of your life. So take a hard look at what your patterns are, understand your why, but also have compassion for yourself. And then know that you're not alone. So many of us have done this journey before you,
Mhm.
too. So we can offer you a hand, experience, strength, and hope. So you can do what you're meant to be in your, so you can be what you're meant to be in your life,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a good place also to segue into how this trait expresses itself in another way. So we
Mm-hmm.
have the other laundry list trait, which is, you know, it's like we're all adult children, and like the effects of that
Yeah.
can express itself as like, oh, I'm the victimizer, I'm the victim, or the victimizer, which is the other laundry list trait. So this
Mm-hmm.
trait 4, other laundry list, is we dominate others and abandon them before they can abandon us,
Mm-hmm.
or we avoid relationships with dependent people altogether.
Yeah.
To avoid being hurt, we isolate and dissociate and thereby abandon ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot in that one too.
Yeah.
And immediately what comes up for me is like, oh, the laundry list trait kind of like templates like an anxious attachment person, an
Yeah.
anxiously attached person, and
Mm-hmm.
this one kind of templates an avoidant person.
Yeah.
So if you're like trying to understand this, like you can kind of look at it this way. And
Mm-hmm.
so what does this mean? So as a defense mechanism, adult children may take control of a relationship by dominating and abandoning their partner before they are abandoned. So it's like, okay, I'm afraid of getting hurt. I got hurt when I was a kid, so I'm gonna like leave, abandon, or hurt first to
Mm-hmm.
protect myself.
Yeah.
So it's a defense mechanism and a protection mechanism.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, they might avoid relationships entirely and protect themselves from any potential hurt or rejection. So you're just not even relating with people, and you're
Yeah.
you're you're kind of
The
in
walls are up.
yeah, emotional isolation, walled off. I don't need anyone. And that's where, some of the personality can come out and be like, I'm good on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had periods of this where I have felt pain in a romantic relationship, and then I've just been like, well, I'm done. Like I don't need
Yeah.
anybody. Or
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go out and have fun. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
all about me and my girlfriends and my career,
Yeah.
But that to me is not like, for me personally, not a life like that I want to live, right?
Yeah, in a shell, walled off
Yeah.
because we got hurt and we're so scared of getting that hurt again, which is understandable because emotional injuries take a long time to heal. And then
Yeah.
for trauma survivors to trust somebody again, I
Mhm.
mean, that's an exercise in itself that takes so much strength and faith to trust somebody again, right? So, why does this happen? Why do trauma survivors, some will dominate others and control them or distance or reject them? Because they're scared themselves.
Mhm.
When we're so scared, when we're living in fear of rejection, when we're living in fear of being judged, when we feel like we're going to be left behind, or we're not going to be respected and honored, and we need to be on guard. So all this is fear of rejection, fear of the past repeating itself. That's fear of I'll hurt you before you hurt me. So it's like a subconscious self-protection mechanism
Yeah.
that,
And like, Go ahead. Sorry.
that we get into in order to avoid vulnerability, so that we don't get too close to somebody to where they can truly hurt us, because we know how much it hurts. So
Hmm.
preemptively, it's called preemptive abandonment. I will abandon you before. It's a coping mechanism
Totally.
designed to, it's to reduce that feeling of helplessness that
Hmm.
comes in relationships, right? You can't help, you can't control, help, or guide how somebody will love you, how much they will love you, how truthful, honorable, how will they behave. And because you don't trust that you are worthy of getting that honor, respect, trust, you say, I'm not going to get this, so I will end it all before I get
Hmm.
hurt again, before they cheat on me again.
Yeah.
So, and all this pattern, it becomes learned avoidance. It's practiced and learned over time in so many different relationships, that it just becomes the identity of that person. That the minute they see a sign of the other person maybe not liking them a little bit or looking at someone else, they run or they freak out. So it's like a pattern that accumulates, I've seen in people and relationships. It's learned avoidance that adds up. And but it starts at as preemptive abandonment. That before you, it's like you know that game of like touch and go. Before you do it, I'll do it.
Yep. Yep. I
Right?
do know that. I do know that. And I definitely tend towards the laundry list trait as opposed to the other laundry list. But I've had periods in my life where I've definitely been dominant in relationship, and that was a defense mechanism because I was afraid of being abandoned, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is also bringing up for me this idea I remember reading in a recovery book that, like, while a person who is constantly seeking out, unhealthy relationship or dysfunction or recreating these abandonment experiences,
Mm-hmm.
when they are presented with the healthy intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
so when I learned that about myself too, I was like, oh, so
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of like a subconscious thing too, where, like, I keep going back to the dysfunction because I'm afraid of the function. I'm afraid of the health. I'm afraid of actually receiving the love and the attention and the care and the safety because I've never experienced it. It's a
Yeah.
complete unknown. I wouldn't know what to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so then I run
Mm-hmm.
to somebody who can give me the thing that's familiar. And so if you're listening, I just again want to just normalize this experience. There isn't anything wrong with you. It is just how these deep childhood experiences that have been ingrained express themselves, and no, there is another way. There's definitely another way. So this might be a great place to transition into the flip side trait.
Yeah. So, how do we heal, right? How do we heal and not run away from intimacy? How do we learn to tolerate intimacy? How do we get out of these addictive patterns and actually face the other person and face vulnerability and fear of rejection? First, we work on ourself, our wholeness, our acceptance. So once you acknowledge your patterns, you accept your patterns, you sit with your patterns, and then you learn to be your own best friend, your own, get your own back, and never abandon yourself. Fear of abandonment is mainly the fear that you will yourself abandon yourself and let yourself go in harm's way, like you might have done in the past.
Mm,
So many times people stay in these misguided loyalty, in these harmful relationships, because they feel like they have to stay loyal to that person, because the addict is the only one that will understand them, and the addict is the only one who gets them, because the addict also has the background of family trauma. So, understanding that you can be okay with healthy people, that you can unwire the emotional addiction, that you start with being your sitting with yourself and never abandoning yourself offering
Mm,
yourself compassion and hope and strength, and building yourself up step by step to
mhm,
where if a life storm comes, your nervous system is not going to go haywire. Have enough awareness of your own patterns so that you know that if this person betrays me, I have all these other things for me where I can fall back on. And never make somebody else your higher power, right? That's number one thing I think I learned in the program. Never make other people your higher power.
mm. Yeah. So yeah, this flip side trait is actually written pretty short. Like the other ones are like kind of long, but this one is just like we do not have a compulsive need to recreate abandonment,
Yeah.
period.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you just explained to us is like how that compulsive need to recreate dissolves, right? Everything you just said. Um, it no longer is a compulsive need. It actually starts to become repulsive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No,
Mm-hmm.
what is
Exactly.
that line in like the big book? It's like we recoil like from it, like a hot flame or something. Like we recoil from relationships, even when we get a whiff of like, oh, this
Mm-hmm.
person is like unavailable. I
Mm-hmm.
do not want to get involved. That is the healed and integrating state, right? The healing and
Yeah.
integrating state. And so in this flip side trait, you know, we don't feel compelled to seek out those relationships that are painful and
Mm-hmm.
chaotic and mirror our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
We are aware of our past traumas and we are learning how to choose those healthy, emotional, available partners. So remember, I was saying oh, we can run from the healthy relationship. I mean, how many people are listening who relate to this trait, who have been presented with a relationship, somebody who is available for you, and you're just like, I don't find that attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I don't think this is a match. And that's the wounding. That's the wounding. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
say until you're blue in the face, I want a healthy relationship. And then when it's presented with you, you're like running in the opposite direction. Like I am
Mm-hmm.
totally guilty of that. Totally.
Yeah, once you become available to yourself is when you become available to other people.
Mhm,
People who say other people are unavailable, it's that they are not available for themselves. When
mhm,
you see unavailability in your partner, you have to see how am I unavailable to myself and chasing my partner. When I fulfill my own needs, is when your partner also becomes available to you. So learn to recognize what your needs are and fulfill them. And that's the magic. That is how it works. Fulfill your own needs, and the whole world shows up to fulfill your needs. Be intimate with yourself, and the whole world wants to be intimate with you. Be healed, and you attract healed people. Be available to yourself, and the whole world becomes available to you. It's
mm,
only the walls that are within us that keep us isolated, dissociated, abandoning ourselves. The moment you stop abandoning yourself, other people also stop abandoning you.
mm. So well said. Yeah, I mean, moving from the laundry list or the other laundry list to the integrated state, it's like I found at the core of it is really about doing the work to become aware and address and recognize your own patterns of abandonment. Like you were saying, the
Yeah.
ways we seek it and then the ways we do it to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And another really powerful thing was that I mentioned earlier in the episode is just like that relationship inventory. So you don't know what you don't know. And so, when you put pen to paper, or maybe it's something you want to bring to therapy or something where you discuss it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But take a look at your history and
Yeah.
just be like, okay, here was the person. This is how it ended. This is how
Mm-hmm.
I felt in the relationship. And see, is there a pattern? And like that's just where it starts. You just become you start to recognize it. And then you start to see, oh, there were like multiple consequences over and over and over again. It's like you don't know until you know. So I
Yeah.
would definitely recommend some kind of exercise or experience for you to really look at your romantic history
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and see what's been going on there. I
And
found that
see how
incredible.
many times you've thrown yourself under the bus for other people.
Yeah,
Right? That's what you'll see. How many times you abandoned yourself just to please somebody who was not even worth pleasing to begin with.
right. I know. I
Like,
know.
oh, just.
And I think I'll also add, it was really helpful for me to start educating myself on attachment styles as
Hmm.
well. Like, there's a lot of really great resources out there to learn about that, but just when I looked at my history and then I was like educating myself on these patterns, I was like, whoa, okay, this is starting to make sense.
Yeah.
Educating yourself on those attachment styles and then learning to really go towards, like, take a risk and go towards the healthy relationship and see
Hmm.
what happens, even if it feels uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, you're gonna have to learn to tolerate the healthy behavior. You're gonna have to learn to tolerate your own company. You're gonna have to learn to say no, set boundaries, and never abandon yourself. These are things we learn and we practice
Mhm.
daily with every relationship. You're gonna have to learn to say no to limerence, learn to say no to addictions. You're going to have to discipline yourself enough to where you can separate yourself from the addictions, which is hard, which is very difficult. Easier said than done.
Mhm. Yeah, because like at the heart of it, it's like a person who's grown up in a traumatic home or a dysfunctional, unstable home is drawn to chaos.
Hmm.
Again, I'm just going to keep hammering this home. It's familiar.
Yeah.
The chaos, the pain is familiar.
Hmm.
And so when you start to step into these healthy relationships, you might be like, this isn't feeling chaotic. There must be something wrong.
Yeah.
That is when you want to maybe challenge yourself to stay and just be like, am I wanting to run because this doesn't feel familiar to me, like chaos and pain?
Hmm.
And am I willing to stay to train my nervous system
Yeah.
on what healthy relationship looks and feels
It's
like?
like exactly. Yeah.
Safety. What does safety feel
Hmm.
like? What
Hmm.
does commitment feel like?
Yeah.
You know, what does having my boundaries respected feel like? What does emotional availability feel like? All of
Hmm.
that. Can you stay to train your system and then it becomes a normal thing for you? That is the healing.
Right. Yeah. Your nervous system then wires slowly to the excitement of doing new healthy things, healthy adventures, healthy outings, healthy projects, less
Mhm.
dysfunction, more function, soothing, and being heard, being seen, being validated. So interdependent relationships come when you are integrated. So the
Mhm.
healthier and healed and whole you become in yourself, the more you will attract healthy, whole, healed people who will bring with them those healthy activities and healthy intimacy. And then slowly you get used to more balanced connection and giving time to yourself. Because at the heart of all this is you not giving your time, energy, resources to yourself.
Mhm.
That's really truly the heart. You've given away your time, energy, and resources to addiction, to unavailable people, to fixing your childhood drama from dysfunctional home. You've given yourself away to everything and everybody except your own self.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's the pain of abandonment. You have abandoned yourself. That's the pain.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
heal that wound and then the relationships will come. Most of my clients, like it kind of sometimes makes me annoyed a little bit because everybody just comes crying about their relationships and the other person. Most 90% of my clients seek help because the relationship is not working and
Mhm.
the man is abandoning them, not realizing that the abandonment started at home with themselves and the man learned how to abandon you because you have been abandoning yourself and you co-signed their abandonment of you as well.
That is like a pretty high level recovery thing. I remember I was probably one of those clients that was focusing on the relationship
Yeah.
as the problem or the person as the problem. And
Hmm.
that move that you just described, that's like ninja move. It's possible. It's totally possible. And it can take time.
Hmm.
Because what is the thing we're doing working the first step in ACA? Coming out of denial.
Hmm.
That is what step one is
Hmm.
all about, coming out of denial. And so
Hmm.
I was one of those people that was in denial about what was going on in my romantic relationship. So if you're listening and you're like, yup, that's me, and I'm like, I'm one of those too,
Yeah.
right? And it is freedom, what you just described. It is
It is free.
freedom
Yes,
to
totally.
to be in relationships without putting your emotional security on
Hmm.
the other person. Like you work
Yeah.
within. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah, and so with the other laundry list, there is an integrated version of that too that I wanted to
Hmm.
talk about. So
Hmm.
with trait four, this flip side of the other laundry list is we accept and comfort the isolated and hurt inner child we have
Hmm.
abandoned and
Hmm.
disavow, and thereby end the need to act out our fears of enmeshment and abandonment with other people.
Hmm.
Boom. Okay,
Right.
there's a lot in this one too. So
Yeah.
it's bringing up inner child work. It is explaining that a path to connecting with your inner child that you're protecting with this avoidant behavior, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
That
Yeah. Totally.
connecting with that hurt, isolated inner child is the pathway of ending your compulsive need to, avoid because you deeply fear like being engulfed,
Yeah.
being meshed, um,
Hmm.
or being abandoned.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
yeah, what does it look like to be in this flip side trait? You're doing inner child work. You're
Yeah.
connecting. And again, your inner child might have gone way into hiding, and it's
Hmm.
time for them
Hmm.
to come out and say hi. But
Yeah.
consistent and persistent without force, but you just keep showing up to whatever reparenting or inner work child practice you're doing, whether it's in therapy or if it's like loving parent guidebook, you just keep showing up, providing that comfort and that care to that part of you that you're trying to protect,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And the enmeshment piece, like becoming engulfed and like, oh, I don't want to be around anybody who's dependent. You
Hmm.
start to like fear that less because you're shoring up your own boundaries, right?
Right.
Like you're getting into healthy relationship with other people who are healthy,
Yeah.
and you both have boundaries, and you both are emotionally literate. Like the
Hmm.
relationship doesn't feel like you're going to be engulfed. You're like, oh, I'm here, and they can take care of themselves, and I can take care of myself, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah, just the emotional self-compassion becomes that foundation of their relationships moving forward, both with themselves, and with others. What would you
Yeah.
add to this?
Yeah, exactly. So as you practice the healed version what of this, as you heal, what happens is that your fear of vulnerability goes away. And your
Mhm.
fear of rejection goes away. Your fear of getting burdened by other people's emotions goes away. So all those rigid walls that you had around you to protect yourself start to become a little bit more flexible, a little bit more porous. You become more available by being present. You practice connection, right? You don't run away. You learn to tolerate the love and the presence of other people slowly because it
Mhm.
takes time. I've worked with avoidance. It takes them a long time before they can tolerate sitting with that
Mhm.
love and affection because they're so scared of getting engulfed in it and being jailed in it and not having any autonomy or decision making. And this is what happened to them as children too, that their parents took over and they had no autonomy, no decision making, no no identity. So when their
Mm,
identity was taken over by adults, they realize I've got to block them out so I don't get taken advantage of or rejected or hurt again. So
mm,
when you practice the work, the boundaries get lighter. Your fear of vulnerability and rejection, you're able to tolerate it, right? And you're not shutting other people out. You're not how do avoidance shut other people out? By judging them, by blaming them, by fault finding in them, by behaving a certain way that makes the other feel less than. Or so
mhm,
you stop the behavior that will create abandonment in the relationship,
mhm,
right? So that's the awareness piece, that how do I create distance? How do I reject love in my life? So once you have awareness of that pattern, then you start sitting with it and start coming out of it with practice, right? And this is all a practice, game
mhm,
of practice.
mm. Yeah, and like I was just thinking as you were sharing, with somebody who tends to be more avoidant, right? Emotionally avoidant, that inner child work is such a great place to start. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
like listening and you're like, okay, well, I definitely have avoidant patterns. Where do I start? It's like you can start with giving that to your inner child. Practice there. And like inner
Mm-hmm.
child work can look a lot of different ways. It could be like non-dominant handwriting, where you ask this younger part of yourself a question and just allow
Mm-hmm.
your hand to write. It could be working intensively, like internal family systems with a certified therapist who does that. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
ACA has the Loving Parent Guidebook. That is, there's meetings and there's a book that just takes you through it all the way. And like
Mm-hmm.
that would be a great place to start with building healthy intimacy between
Yes.
you and your inner child. And then once you have that unlock,
Mm-hmm.
bringing it out into your relationships. And I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee once you start transforming that relationship with your inner child, you're going to see your external relationships transform
Yes.
too.
Yeah, it all starts with your relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
Exactly. That is great. How are you feeling? I feel so complete. I feel so good about discussing this trait and how the healed version of this behavioral pattern looks like. How are
Mhm.
you feeling?
Feels like I ate a delicious meal.
All right. Okay, so write to us. You can leave comments on the podcast or you can email us with your questions. We're happy to guide you on your journey. And I hope this episode was helpful to you in understanding and healing your abandonment wound. Thank you
Mm.
so much.
Bye, everyone.